The laughter hit her before the church bells ever could, sharp and careless, echoing off the brick steps as if the world itself had decided to judge her that morning. Margaret felt it press into her chest while she stood in borrowed shoes and a modest dress, watching people shake their heads as she walked past with a man everyone in town whispered about. Some called him broken. Others said dangerous. A few simply said mad. And there she was, choosing him anyway. If this were you, standing there with every eye measuring your worth by the man beside you, would you have turned back, or would you have taken one more step forward and let love cost you everything? Margaret had grown up in Ohio believing life rewarded good choices, yet nothing in her past prepared her for the storm that followed marrying Samuel. He arrived in her life quietly, a man with distant eyes, worn clothes, and a reputation stitched together by rumors instead of facts. People said he talked to himself, that he vanished for days, that he carried the weight of a mind fractured beyond repair. What they never said was how he listened when Margaret spoke, how he noticed the smallest changes in her voice, or how his hands trembled not with violence but with fear of being unwanted. When she said yes to him, she knew she was choosing a harder road, but she believed love was not meant to be easy. It was meant to be true. Life after the wedding was not a fairy tale. They rented a tiny apartment above a closed-down diner, the paint peeling like old regrets. Margaret worked long shifts at a nursing home, coming home exhausted, only to find Samuel pacing the room, lost in thoughts he could not explain. Some nights he barely slept, staring at the ceiling as if memories were written there. Other nights he clung to her presence like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Bills stacked up. Neighbors complained. Friends disappeared. Even her own family stopped calling, quietly convinced she had ruined her life. In the quiet moments, Margaret wondered if love was supposed to hurt this much, and whether staying was courage or foolishness. The mocking never really stopped. At grocery stores, church gatherings, even online, people spoke about her with pity or cruelty. They called her desperate. They said she had thrown her future away. Strangers who knew nothing about her life felt entitled to judge it. What they never saw were the mornings Samuel cooked breakfast badly but proudly, or the nights he sat beside her in silence, holding her hand as if it were sacred. Margaret learned that dignity sometimes meant enduring misunderstanding without explanation. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in, whispering that maybe she had made the wrong choice. If you were her, worn down by judgment and fear, would you have stayed when walking away promised relief? Samuel carried a past he never spoke about, but it followed him like a shadow. Old habits of secrecy, sudden trips, guarded expressions. Margaret once found documents he quickly hid, papers filled with numbers too large to make sense, names of corporations she had heard on the news. When she asked, he brushed it off with a nervous smile, saying it was nothing, just old work he no longer belonged to. She wanted to believe him, and so she did, because love sometimes chooses trust even when clarity is missing. Yet the strain of poverty and uncertainty began to wear on her spirit. She sold her grandmother's jewelry to pay rent. She skipped meals so Samuel could eat. Quiet sacrifices became her daily language of love. Then came the night everything nearly broke. Samuel disappeared for 3 days without a word. Margaret imagined accidents, hospitals, police stations. She cried alone, humiliated and terrified, convinced she had finally lost him to the chaos in his mind. When he returned, thinner and shaken, something in him had shifted. He collapsed into sleep, and for the first time, Margaret allowed herself to feel anger alongside love. She realized devotion did not mean erasing herself. The next morning, she made a decision to speak her truth, whatever the cost. Sometimes love demands not silence, but honesty. What followed was not a dramatic confession, but a slow unraveling. Samuel began to open up, piece by piece, like someone relearning how to trust daylight after years underground. He admitted he had once built something enormous, a technology empire born from a mind that worked faster than most could follow. The pressure had shattered him. Lawsuits, betrayals, public collapse. He walked away from everything, choosing anonymity over madness fueled by power. The money remained, hidden and untouched, because he no longer trusted himself to live with it. People called him insane because he refused to explain. Margaret listened, heart-aching, realizing the man she married was not broken beyond repair, but wounded beyond understanding. Change did not come overnight. Therapy replaced silence. Stability replaced fear. One afternoon, Samuel took Margaret to a quiet office building downtown. She expected another disappointment. Instead, she watched executives stand when he entered, their respect heavy with recognition. In that moment, the truth could no longer hide. He was not pretending anymore. The wealth he had abandoned was still his, multiplied in waiting. Margaret felt dizzy, not from relief, but from the weight of all they had endured unnecessarily. She thought of the mocking faces, the lonely nights, the sacrifices that could never be undone. When their life changed, it did so quietly. They moved into a modest house, not a mansion. Samuel funded mental health programs across the country, refusing publicity. Margaret returned to school, finally chasing dreams she had postponed. The people who once laughed now smiled politely, unaware that their kindness came too late. Margaret did not correct them. She had learned that validation from others was fragile and fleeting. What mattered was the love that survived when nothing else made sense. Yet the greatest transformation was not financial. Samuel began to laugh again, softly at first, then freely. Margaret saw peace settle into his eyes where storms once lived. She realized love had not saved him alone, patience had. Faith had. Choosing each other when the world said not to. Sometimes, she wondered how many people walk away from miracles because they look too much like madness at first glance. Before the story ends, take a moment and ask yourself, would you have stayed when everyone mocked your choice, or would you have left before the truth revealed itself? Years later, standing hand in hand at a charity event they funded anonymously, Margaret felt no bitterness toward the past. Only gratitude. Love had cost her comfort, pride, and certainty, but it gave her something far greater. It taught her that the heart often sees value long before the world does. And sometimes, the man everyone calls mad is simply carrying a weight no one else is brave enough to help him bear. If this story stirred something inside you, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story truly touched your heart, gently reminding you of kindness, patience, or second chances, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, so more hearts can be reached with stories that matter.